Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, or Wednesday, I should say. I'm so used to saying Tuesday. Wednesday, June 24th meeting of the Finance Committee. To open the meeting, I will say, as I always do these days, pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call of the committee will be taken. Mr. Alfred.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
And our newest member, I assume you got sworn in, Mr. Whitaker.
Here. I did get sworn in. Thank you.
Okay, that was the first question I was going to ask you, was make sure you were officially sworn in before you can take your place on the committee. But welcome aboard. And I will just go over very quickly since we have a new member tonight. You've seen our meetings, you know how it works. Generally, all I ask is that you use the raise hand function if you want to say something. I ask that of the committee members just so I can try to keep an orderly flow of conversation going. But welcome aboard. And the first thing we have to do is to reorganize for the coming year. So I'll entertain, we'll start with the three positions. We'll go chair, vice chair, then clerk. So any nominations for chair?
So I would like to make a nomination of the triple threat from the other Cambridge College or university. The one, the only, the Dr. Shada.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other nominations for chair? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. This has to be roll call. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Thank you, and I'll abstain. So I've never felt comfortable voting for myself. So, but thank you very much. Okay, we'll now consider nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Dan.
Second.
Okay. Okay, any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
I'll abstain.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yep.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And by the way, Vin, is there a reason why you don't have your video on?
Oh, no.
Because the only reason I say it is because when you don't have video on, it doesn't put you with all the other members, so I have to keep looking down to.
I thought I had it. My bad.
I don't know. You look pretty nice with your suit on in your picture.
Well, I was going to say, if you don't show your face, then you're going to end up being clerk again. But that. Anyway, okay. So congratulations, Dan. Any nominations for clerk?
I'd like to nominate. No. I'll nominate
Mark.
Mark. Yes, second.
Okay. Any further nominations for clerk of the committee? Okay. Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. What?
Ben, you sure you don't want it?
Well, Vin is never going to use the restroom again during one of our meetings when we're reorganizing. So, Mr. Alfred.
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
I'll abstain.
And Mr. Murphy.
Yes, emphatically.
Okay, and just for the record, since I didn't say this last time, I vote aye on both the vice chair and the clerk nominations. So, okay, congratulations. Now, Mark, just the one thing, I'll talk to you offline about what the job of the clerk involves. But the first thing you're going to need to do today is take the meeting notes today to make the minutes. Either that, since we're being recorded and televised, the other alternative is to just watch it later and drop something. Okay, so, okay, so let's see. Okay, so just to go over a couple of things now that we've taken care of our reorganization for the year. We have, first of all, Mr. Murphy, do we have any minutes for this week? I don't think we do. Are they ready for approval?
Did, but I don't think I didn't get anything back. It was the one, I sent one out last week, but I didn't get anything from anybody. because it was
Okay.
in addition to the ones from, I want to say it was May, we were looking at. So these
Okay.
were going back to July of 2019. And I don't
Okay.
believe anybody sent anything to me, so we probably should hold off. Because I'm sure Susan and you will want to give me information edits. And I'll send you, everybody, all the Celeste has sent me a whole bunch of minutes, so I'll update
Yes,
those.
and that goes to our next thing,
Yes.
which is, right, Celeste, unfortunately for us, Celeste has to return to her real day job at the treasurer's office now. So we no longer have administrative support, at least for the moment. However, we obviously do have a budget
Yep.
for this. So given that we now have our former recording secretary has resigned and we do have money, I would say that we should, as a committee, vote to post the job for the recording secretary. Do I have a motion to that
Yes.
effect?
Well,
Nope.
can we talk about that first, Ken?
Sure, go ahead.
So,
No, well, let me just be clear. We can make the motion to post the job, and once it's seconded, we can have debate on that motion. So we can.
Seconded.
So Tim seconded. Okay. So now, Suzanne, what do you want to say about it?
well, so I guess my question is are all of our town employees back working full time at whatever their full time equivalent of their position is?
I do not know, but I know where you're going with this, and I'm going to go down the same route, which is I'm going to see part of the problem we have right now is that we have an outgoing town administrator and a new one coming in a couple of weeks, right? So I do not know. I don't know what Jeff's availability is. Like I know he's on vacation. He's got all this accumulated vacation stuff. So under ordinary circumstances, I'd be going to Jeff and saying, can you put the word out among any town employees that are still not fully employed, so to speak, right? Fully engaged is more the right way to say it. However, I don't know if I can do that because Jeff is not around. But
we
yes,
have
my plan is to try to find out whether that's the case. And if we have to wait, I think we still post the job because I think eventually we will need to get somebody into that position. And if we do get somebody, might as well start doing that.
I would
But yes,
agree
I'm going to pursue that as well.
I would agree with you, Ken, that regardless of what path we get for internal people, we still have to post this because once we get up and running, we'll still need the position to be filled.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's why
will we have flexibility on when they would start? I would just hate, and I know it's not a significant amount of dollars by any stretch, but to the extent we can utilize other people and save the town some money, I would propose we do that. But I'm not saying don't post. I just would like to have some flexibility on when they would start if we move forward.
What I will do more than likely is I'll talk to Mary about the posting, and I will, and in that process, and I'll also do in parallel, find out whether there is an opportunity for internal work. If I can adjust the date, right? In other words, when you post a job, you don't have to say it starts right now. You can say it starts, end of July or something like that. And then if we think we're going to be, again, I'll work both angles, but I'm not going to post the job saying it starts immediately if we know that we have somebody to cover it for some, we can cover it internally for some longer period of time.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So any further debate on, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so I think we should absolutely post it. And I do know, I know that there's a program at the schools that they may have to, furlough some workers from. And I know it's not nearly and would not make up for any applicants, the money that probably is lost from that, but it could be a pool of applicants that might be interested in doing it at least for a little while. But obviously we post it and anyone can apply, but.
Right. So, okay, any further discussion on the motion to post the recording secretary position? Okay, hearing none, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye. So, okay, I'll take care of that. As I said, I'll follow up with Mary to see if there's, follow up with our current or future town administrator, whatever, to see if there's an opportunity to get somebody else to step in for Celeste. But I would like to say, just I would like to say that just express my appreciation, and I think the whole committee's appreciation for the work that Celeste has done. We've been in a real minutes pickle, given that we had difficulty with our prior recording secretary, and so she's been helping us out a lot. She helped us catch up on a lot of things. We still have a little more to do, but we're in much better shape thanks to the work that she put in. So I really appreciate her going the extra mile for us over the last couple of months. So
Yay.
Okay, so now I know that, so we did, as far as line item transfers, I did get confirmation from Sharon just prior, and she's on the call, just prior to the meeting about 6 o'clock tonight, that all the line item transfers are now in our box, but I didn't have the opportunity to go get them. And that's okay, because we're going to be meeting next Tuesday, which is June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year. So next Tuesday, we'll plan on going through all the additional transfers that we have. And in case you're wondering, we do have flexibility in the sense that we have till July 15th technically to approve them. So if there are any problems we run into next week, it's not like we have to approve next Tuesday. Mr. Murphy.
Yes, Mr. Shader, I just have a question. Why doesn't Sharon or somebody scan them to you rather than you actually having to go up to the town hall?
Well, she could, but ultimately I have to sign them. That's the thing.
But you could print them out at your house and sign said documents. Just thinking. Is what I'm doing.
The select board needs
correct.
to sign it. The select board needs to sign it too, and you need one document that's probably full, original copy.
It depends on the transfer. The select board doesn't need to sign every one of them, but yes, they need to sign a bunch of them.
We can go DocuSign and get it all done electronically.
Yeah.
I'd spend more money on new technology. Anyway, go ahead.
And to be fair, right? It's not like going to town hall is a big deal. It's just that in this case, I just happened to be. I came home at like 6:15 and had to make dinner for the kids and stuff like that. So I was like, I just can't do it tonight. But if she had, and I'm not throwing Sharon under the bus here because it's she gets it done when she gets it done. But I'm saying like it's one of these things where, on ordinary circumstances, if it were a Tuesday night, I would have just zipped over there and got. But Wednesday just is more complicated for me to get over there, so that's what made it tougher. So, okay, so that's one thing. So we'll have more. We'll have those. We do still have the transfers from last week for the select board. We'll talk about those when we get to the select board topic, right? Because Mr. Cronin's here, and we're gonna, we'll get the update on a whole bunch of select board stuff. So we'll take care of the rest of the line item transfers next Tuesday. The other thing I wanted to give, and this is mostly for like Utah and Rich and those guys that I know are here for our sustainability coordinator. He emailed me that he could not make this evening because we had to switch. He had originally said he could make Tuesday. When I told him we had to switch to Wednesday, he told me he couldn't make Wednesday. So he's going to he agreed to come in next Tuesday. So for those of you who are sitting around for the sustainability coordinator, he's not going to be here tonight. Mr. Murphy, you're on mute, Vin.
Who isn't going to attend tonight? The sustainability?
The sustainability coordinator.
Okay.
Remember, we had questions about we wanted to get an update on progress and so forth.
Thank you.
So, but that's going to be next Tuesday instead of tonight. So, okay. So Utah and Rich and Joan, if you guys don't want to hang out, you don't have to. But if you want to come join the fun, you're more than welcome to. So.
Rich's dinner is looking good. I'm wanting to go there.
Well, that's why I said I wanted to stay. I wanted to let them know so they didn't sit through our whole meeting waiting for Matt when he wasn't coming in tonight.
They do have to share if they.
That's
That's right. You know what they say: if you make some for one person, you got to make some for everybody. So, okay. Okay. So next up, so that covers what we just talked about. Covers like the first 4 items on our agenda tonight. So now we're on the select board stuff. So we have Mr. Cronin here. We have their newest member, Mr. Sparrow, but obviously they can't deliberate, so to speak. So I think Ben's going to listen rather than speak. So first, Mr. Cronin, let's talk the line item transfers. And Sharon might want to participate in this because I know that there have been changes to the paperwork that I have about that we have. Just to give you an update, John, this is what Sharon gave me last week, and she can correct me if things have changed, right? There's one for a transfer for streetlights, 2 for the select board. One was for the hours for Donna, which I thought we approved, but I guess we held that one. And the 44,500 for the legal expenses. So you can tackle them in any order. If you want to do streetlight, now, first of all, Sharon, are all three of these still relevant?
Yes, you still need to do Donna. You need to do streetlights.
Okay.
I sent your committee an updated sheet today. I think Vin had asked me to compare 19 to 20. So I sent you out a new spreadsheet that gave you the detail of 19. And then I summarized both at the bottom of the tab for FY20, so you can compare side by side what we paid each lawyer, firm, whatever, that we have paid.
Okay.
And
So,
in 20, you will see that Beacon and Weltman are two that were not on the list from last year. Weltman was the special counsel that we had to use for that $20,000
right.
settlement that we paid.
Mhm.
These were the fees for the firm that we needed to use for that. And it's still showing $9,900 for Beacon. And I have found out today that that is actually part of a grant that we got. And originally there wasn't enough money in the grant, but I guess this last portion of it, we need to ask for reimbursement. So that can come out of here as well. So if I take the 99, the 10,000 for Weltman is what it is. But $9,900 can come out of this budget, which would make the expenditures more like 95,000, which, anyway, puts our deficit more in the $28,000 range, not 37.
Okay. So let's take this one by one. We'll do what I hope are the easiest ones first, which is the streetlights one. That's $13,000, and that was strictly just electricity costs.
There's some repair costs in that as well.
Okay. Now, Mr. Murphy, you had before. I missed you before. You had a comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, I thought they being the select board, recommended several different things to get moved around. I heard the end of it, and Jeff was saying some of the costs should have been moved to different grants. I know one of it, Sharon just mentioned, but is this all of it? I mean, Lord Environmental, was that included? I'm just looking at all the differences.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just
So
let's wait 1 minute because I want to take
my
care of the street.
question.
Yeah.
Okay, when we get there, is just, should we just hold off talking about that one until they're finalized?
Well, okay. Well, let's go to, this is why I just wanted to get it. I wanted to first find out whether these were still 3 transfers in play. Let's take care of the 2 easy ones first.
Sure.
And then we'll talk about that professional technical one. So the first one, as I said, is the street lights, which was $13,000. And it says maintenance costs and electricity. So the question is, we haven't had an issue with streetlights for a while. So do we know why? I think that whole budget is tiny. So it's one of these things where, a $13,000 overage is not I'm pulling it up right now just to, hold on a second here. So streetlights, the whole budget is $62,000. So a $13,000 overage is 20%. And so I'm just trying to understand what was that. And by the way, Mr. Cronin, feel free to chime in on any of these. These are all your boards. So chime in anytime you need to.
Okay, well, streetlights can technically go down to closer to 12,000 now that I've paid all the individual streetlight bills. The only bill I've got left, I updated that sheet for you guys as well. I only have the one big payment left. But you have transferred money into streetlights in years past. This is not new.
Okay. Okay. So, and just out of curiosity, Mr. Cronin, one quick question.
Sure.
We had this discussion a decade or so ago about the streetlights and do we take ownership? And is that something your board is still looking at in terms of of, because the big conundrum, and we've said this before, but I'll say it again, especially since we have the sustainability folks on the call, right? We have this perverse situation where we don't own the lights. And because we don't own the lights, there's no incentive for Eversource to put in energy efficient lights like new LEDs or something like that, because they make money off the electricity we pay for the lights, right? So, that's just for the audience. So I know the select board has looked at various options. Do we buy the lights outright? What happens? So have we had discussion with them about getting better lighting, have more efficient lighting?
Honestly, Ken, in the last year or two, I've not heard of any discussions on our board. When I first got on, I recall Selectman Marsden bringing that up, and I think he brought it up from a historical perspective. It has not entered our conversations, and I would agree with you. If we were to move forward with an idea, I'd look to our sustainability coordinator to do some research on grants and other programs to help the town tackle what would likely be a considerable upfront cost, and then evaluate the ROI on that. But we have not done anything in the last year or so.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell.
I just wanted to clarify, Ken, you were saying minus 13,000, but when I look at the spreadsheet, they're 11,900. Am I looking at the wrong spreadsheet?
Well, that's
You are
probably
looking at the
number.
updated spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's the updated number. I'm looking at the form, not the spreadsheet. So the other question that does raise an administrative question, Sharon, which is, do you have updated forms for me, or how are we going to do that?
I do not have updated forms. I can get you one for next Tuesday if you'd like me to reduce it.
Well, in a sense, it doesn't really matter because it's.
Well, that's exactly it. At this point, I'm either closing out $1,000 out of streetlights or $1,000 out of the account I was taking it from.
Right. So
Kind
okay,
of
so
a
that's
moot
fine.
point at this point, but the overage is closer to 12,000, not 13.
Okay, Mr. Alfred.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand. So when I add up the central mass signal charges and the bell traffic signal maintenance, which I assume that's most of the additional maintenance that was done, it was and it's about 9,500. So it seems like there's a $2,500 delta on top of that. I'm just trying. Were the rates higher? Sharon says there has been a transfer. I don't remember one in my time. It's been about 8 years. I could have missed it, but I just curious if we're maybe need to adjust our budgeting going forward.
Well, that's kind of what I asked, but yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. In 2018, we transferred 5,000 into streetlights. In 2019, we transferred 9,000 into streetlights.
I just must have maybe I missed those meetings. Okay, and so it seems like probably we're budgeting a little low in streetlights then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to say what we spent in 2019, we spent 68,000 in streetlights. So far this year, we've spent 70,000, but I do have that one last big payment, which can run close to $4,000.
Yeah, so it sounds like we should probably bump up the streetlight budget if we can.
Yep. I'm going to make that right now.
I have a question.
Yes, well, Sue, I think Sue was next, so go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, so during the budget cycle, we have always asked to have everything trued up so that we understand what the true expenses are. So did this not get applied? To Dan's point, I'm super confused as to why this is so far off and what the driver is around that.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, because the trend for the 6-year average prior to 19 was 61,000. It's right there on the cover sheet that we got on January 9th from Jeff. So something happened in 19. Was it the streetlights, the infamous streetlights downtown? Did that bump it up? That seems like a huge jump just for streetlights. So I'd just be curious what's going on, what happened, and why this is a huge trend changing, especially since my understanding is electricity costs have gone down, but I could be wrong.
It does seem like there's a lot of street light maintenance. It's not so much like light poles.
Is that something that we drive? Meaning like the town asks for maintenance, or is it being done?
Well, troubleshooting, traffic seeing lights out. I mean, so it seems like some of it's just.
But we would have a sense of that, right? I mean, that should be sort of tracked, monitored. Oh, we have an uptick because our lights are going out. And then, we should somehow know. We should understand why, I guess, behind it. Is there something that's there?
The big drivers is one charge of IMSA conductor cable, 12-inch LED. I don't know what that is or what that was for, and that was in January for $3,600. So that's like.
I guess, who do the bills go to, and who's asking the questions, and who should be here to sort of walk us through what the issues are that we're seeing these escalations on?
Do these bills go directly to you, Sharon, or do they go to the town administrator, the select board's office?
It goes through Jeff first.
Okay, so there's your answer, Sue. That's the town administrator's responsibility.
Yeah.
So
I think it would be helpful to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, right, we're not going to get an answer in the short term, right? And again, and this is, just because we're in the middle of a transition from one TA to another. So but I've made note of that, and that'll be one of the things that, we'll try to get, when our new town administrator gets on board, we'll try to get him to dig into that a little bit more.
So can we hold the bill until we understand what the charges are? I don't know.
We understand what the charges are. The question is why are they? We know you see the detail. It's electricity and maintenance on the streetlights, right? What we don't know is why they went up, right?
But we don't know what the maintenance was for. We don't know if it was erroneously charged. Did anyone review the invoice to say, yeah, that's true, that's actually applied to our town?
Catherine has his hand up, and he rarely raises his hand, so maybe he has some answers for us.
Yes. Okay, go ahead, Chief Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving forward, one suggestion that I might suggest that the committee considers is perhaps splitting this line into two different appropriations. Historically, up until a couple of years ago, the charges were mostly related to streetlights. And pretty much the only traffic intersection lights that we had were at Woodland, Washington and High, Concord and Washington, and Highland Street. Since then, we've more than doubled the number of traffic signals that we have going through town, and those often require a lot of maintenance. When there's a problem with a sensor that's not responding properly to traffic, that requires a call to these specialized vendors that need to come out, and we're being charged for the bucket truck, we're being charged for the hourly rate, they're passing on the expense of a detail officer. So these, just one or two calls to Central Mass Signal is going to be a very large expenditure. So if you're trying to compare historically to what was just streetlights up until a few years ago, essentially, versus the new paradigm, perhaps moving forward in 21, we might want to split it into street lighting and traffic signals.
But so this might be a stupid question, but the street lights, traffic signals are brand new. They shouldn't be breaking down or are they? Shouldn't they be under warranty at the very least?
There have been some repairs that have been done under warranty, but not all of them. We recently had to have some repairs done at Washington and Hollis, which when we checked with the vendor, we were told that it was not within warranty because although they seem new, I believe this will actually be our second summer with the downtown signalization. So a lot of them are well past their warranty period.
So that sounds like a great suggestion. Obviously, that's not the finance committee's decision to make, but the select board maybe will hear that, and Sharon can hear that, and they can consider it.
Oh, I can easily put another line item in that department for repairs and maintenance, and then here's just the electricity going forward, if that'll make it easier for everybody.
Yes, that'll make it easier for everybody.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, Michelle, you had something.
My question was, is that all streetlights or is it the new traffic lights? That was my question, was how it was broken up.
Well, it sounds like we just got the answer, which is
Right.
it's the traffic lights that are causing.
Yeah, so he anticipated my question. So thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
except that we were supposed to true these up. So I'm still a little confused as to what happened in the budget process.
Oh, okay. So you're asking a different question now. I think the first question was why did it jump up? And why did we see it increase last year and this year? And we now know the answer to that, right? We have more streetlights and they're requiring more, more traffic lights. And that's where they've been requiring more maintenance because just the sheer number of them is larger. Okay. So then the second part of that is why did we get a budget request for a number that doesn't make sense, right? So,
Sort of, yeah. Because I mean, if 2019 was 68 and 2020 is 70, that's only a $2,000 difference. That's not what we're talking about.
No, I thought you were talking about why we had the budget at 62 when it's running at 68 and 70 now.
That's my question, right?
And-
If it
and
was
so-
68, then it should have been 68 when we
Right.
were doing the
It
budgeting.
was,
Yes.
because it came to us and it was $63,000 request. And I'm guessing it was appropriated 62 because it was looking at the run rate of the prior 6 years without thinking and adding into the streetlights and the additional electrical load and all the other costs and related to that when it was proposed. So that's.
Or the transfers from last year weren't taken into consideration and trued up is what I think I'm hearing.
I'm guessing that too, because if you look at the cover sheet he sent to us, Jeff did, on January 9th, it shows what the runway rate had been. It was 61, a little under 62,000. So, we said, oh, okay, that seems reasonable. And we didn't question it as a committee because we don't like to add costs. We take the word and, hey, this is what it should be, but it wasn't correct. So nobody had taken into consideration the additional cost from their traffic lights, I'm guessing.
Right.
So
the answer to your question, Sue, is that you are correct that the truing up did not happen in the correct way. Well, let me put it this way: the truing up didn't happen, right? It was just an average. Wasn't looked at the actual expenses. Didn't factor in the overages from prior years. Now, the only thing that's kind of a little bit disappointing about that, in one sense, is just that that's not hard work to do in a sense because Sharon, and I'm not. This is not Sharon's job. I'm saying it's just from the point of view of the budget, the preparation by the town administrator, right? It's in the system, right? You can see, you don't even have to look at what last year's appropriation was. You can just look in the system and say what was spent in that line item and track that directly. So, okay. So the question is, do you want additional information? Do you want to approve this 13,000 now? Does anybody, Mr. Murphy?
I'm okay proceeding with, the suggestion to the select board that, they asked Sharon to make those changes to the accounting so that we can project it going forward. And then we also sort of look at an updated number for budgeting purposes for
21.
21.
Yep. Mr. Murphy, you're on mute. Mr. Ben. Ben, you're on mute.
I would agree with Dan there. My only thing was I thought the chief suggested breaking out traffic lights, and maybe I misheard him. And he
What did I
said
say?
to break personnel.
Do you want to break it? I guess that's the question, right? Would we, again, it's up to the select board how they want to do it, but would we prefer an electricity, Sharon's original proposal was separate the electric part, so that the utility part of it, and then the maintenance for both traffic lights and street lights, right? Although the maintenance of the street lights is not covered by us right now.
My preference would be, a breakdown that allows us to see trends and budget going forward, but that also is not overly burdensome on the accounting. So whatever sort of gets into that sweet spot.
I would suggest the load is different on street lighting because they only come up at night versus the traffics are 24/7. So there's a different load and demand and probably cost. So maybe I'm just thinking it would be a different need, and if we're gonna, just throwing it out because there's a huge increase because of the said traffic lights. I don't want to add work, but it is a material difference. So what did the chief suggest? Don't recall. I apologize. But I thought he suggested breaking out traffic lights.
Allowing a subline for traffic lights and one for street lights. Yeah. I mean, the street lights one would be just the electricity cost. The traffic light line would be the electricity plus maintenance.
But I thought that was for FY21. I don't know.
Well, no, we want to see.
It doesn't, yeah, it's not going to impact this transfer. It's just
Right.
going forward.
Right.
It should be separate regardless of what we do, in my opinion. If it's not an overly burdensome ask. So you do street lights, you do traffic lights, and then you do maintenance.
Yes, I would agree.
Would be my suggestion.
But just to be clear, that's still one account. It would still be the street lights account, but then it would be subcategories of traffic lights.
Department, multiple lines.
Right. But we don't need to create 3 different departments for this, right? Just as one
I
department.
would agree.
Right, but we can still vote right now on this transfer.
Correct. That doesn't impact this transfer at all.
So before we vote, just one other consideration. I mean, maybe this is stupid, but streetlights lasting for 1 year and that's it, and then starting to break down, to me is super concerning. Like, I don't get it. And so for anything that we had to get fixed, can't we go back to the manufacturer or whoever we purchased it from and argue that point? Just a 1 year lifespan without it starting to break down seems crazy to me.
No,
Is that wrong? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's normal, but that just seems ludicrous.
It does, but they also get blown around in the wind. I don't know. I mean,
I don't disagree, but still 1 year. I mean,
But they should be built to withstand that. I mean, that's what they're built for.
Yeah.
They're not.
This is Tina Hine here. I just want to add to the conversation, if I can, for a second.
Yep,
We've gone over this. Yeah, we've gone over this with McMahon, and to your comments, we had it ourselves and brought all of it up with McMahon. Where's the warranty? This is disappointing, everything. And McMahon went back to the vendor and pursued it and came back to say that by the time you were done with the fight, which would probably involve litigation to get them to cover it, you spent more on that than you have on the repair costs. But to the bigger question about avoiding kind of repair costs on items that are, a year or 18 months old, we did get from McMahon a proposal for $77,000 to upgrade one of the pieces of the system that's failing. And we put that out to the senator and our state rep as a request on our special projects list. We've obviously not heard back. And we removed it from the capital request for this warrant. So that's where we stand on looking forward in terms of trying to address the repair concerns into the future, the cost of future repairs. But I tell you that the select board shares the concerns about having to replace equipment that was, a year to 18 months. And we pursued it as best as we could at the time. And here's where we are today. And so the solution would be to look to replace the equipment with something that's in the ground, up on the pole and not in the ground. It's the piece that's in the ground, I guess, that breaks down easily. I think that's what we're seeing in part to explain some of the costs on repairs. So I'm not sure if that's helpful or not, but we were quoted $77,000 to replace one of these pieces of equipment that has a short lifespan.
This sounds a little bit like a racket.
Well, can I just ask one thing, and interject one thing quickly, Sue, and then I'll get to you and Mark. The one thing I would say, Tina, that is bothersome about that, and I appreciate that you guys are on it, which is good, okay? But the one thing that bothers me is we paid a lot of money to McMahon to design that system, right? So if they're saying, oh, okay, you should fork over 77 grand to replace this piece, then that should be on them, right? We paid them a ton of money to design a system that was going to work. And if they come around and say, oh, well, we gave you a piece of crap equipment, right? So now 2 years in, pay $77,000 to change the design, we should be screaming about that too. I mean, and I understand you are probably, but somebody should be saying to McMahon, you were paid to design a system that was going to last more than 18 months. And explain to us why you're now turning around as our consultant or advisor saying, oh yeah, fork over 77 grand to buy another piece of equipment that lasted, because our design only lasted a year and a half. So
I guess I have two comments, and Tina, thank you for that, and I'm glad you guys were involved. One is, I don't think we should ever buy equipment from the same manufacturer again, given what we just went through. And two, I know we've talked before about, I think Dan's brought up having like a CFO role. I think someone needs to have the very strong contracting experience, because a 1-year warranty to me just seems super short. And so having someone who's got the experience to be able to negotiate the contracts to get us better protection, so we don't have to turn around and sue someone for something that seems reasonable, would be very helpful going forward. So.
Sure. I mean, I hear what you're saying. The design for this was what, 2015, 2016. So here we are, 4 years later. So I don't have perspective from that point of view, but I certainly hear your comments. And we can, in future conversations with McMahon, push on this when future design comes up for any other project, push as well. I hear what you're saying.
Okay, Mr. Whitaker.
Hopefully, because obviously we're not going to be able to afford a CFO this year, and who knows about next year. Hopefully Travis will be able to help us on that as well. So.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Whitaker.
I'm just curious, is there other vendors that we could use? I mean, I know that in my line of work, if I'm not living up to expectations, somebody's just going to go find the next guy who can do what I do. So I'm just kind of curious, has that been explored? It seems absurd to me that we would have to try to sue them to do what they were supposed to be doing to begin with. And maybe I'm way oversimplifying it in my mind, but it just seems absurd.
Well, it depends on who we're suing. That's the only thing I just want to be clear on, right? There's the McMahon that designed the system, then there's the contractor that put the system in, and then there's the contract, whoever made the equipment, right? So it's not, they're three distinct things, right? The design may have been good, the equipment may have been bad, the install may have been bad, right? And so who gets sued depends on where the problem is. But
and by the way, they're all going to point the finger at each other, and you're going to get nowhere. So you're going to end up spending a ton of money.
If they gave a 1-year warranty and it's past the 1-year warranty, and I don't know how you're going to sue someone.
Well, the bigger issue, sue or not sue, if we forget about the litigation part of it, my bigger issue is if somebody came to me and said, design a system for me, and then I designed a system for them, and then a year in, they said, hey, this part of the system's failing, and I said to them, yeah, it's failing. You should have done, we should do this, replace it with this piece of equipment. Then I'd have them looking at me saying, why'd you give me a design that used this crappy piece of equipment in the first place if you knew that this was going to be a problem point? And I'm not trying to speak for McMahon. Maybe they have perfectly legitimate reasons for why they did it or whatever. But I also think we got to be careful here. We're getting a little bit astray. The whole this is line item.
You said this is the simplest one, so let's.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what's worrying me, right? It's $13,000 for paying the streetlights. I think that the select board heard all our concerns, and now let's leave it up to them to go follow up on it.
I make a motion.
Yes. Hold it. I will tell you what the motion you want to make is if people want to vote this now. This is the motion would be that we approve a line item transfer to the streetlight budget in the amount of $13,000 from the liability insurance budget, which is organization 01945, object 57400. And just to be clear, we're transferring it to the you wrote energy, Sharon, but I think it's streetlights, the energy line in there, which is 01424, object 52100. So 13,000 from liability insurance to streetlights.
But is it exactly 13,000?
Yes, that's what's on the form. Yep.
Moved.
Second.
Okay. Okay. Any further discussion on this
no
transfer?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to rehash this, but I thought it was closer. Somebody said it was closer to 12,000.
It is, but the form I have says 13, and I can either get an updated form, but from the math point of view, it doesn't matter because there's either going to be excess in the from line or excess in the to line, and in a week, wherever it is gets swept into free cash anyway. That's why it doesn't matter that we're putting more 1,000 in there, but then a week from now, that's going to get swept into free cash.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's okay. Ask questions. That's what we're here for. So, okay, any further discussion? So Tim, you made the motion and I had like 4 seconds. Who wants to take credit? Vin, take credit for the second?
I did.
Okay, then, okay, any further discussion on the streetlights transfer? Okay, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so this one's good. Put this in my to be signed pile. Okay, the other hopefully easy one that doesn't involve repairing equipment or any warranties, so it should be better, is Donna, I mentioned this last week. There's a $1,700 transfer request again from the excess and the liability insurance line to the select board's budget for the additional clerical, they cover the additional hours Donna has put in. As most of you know, our administrator in the select board office, I don't know what her technical title is, chief administrator or whatever, but she's been out for a little while. And so Donna has been putting in extra time, and that's what this is for. So Mr. Alfred.
Yeah, just a sort of a general question about this, because I don't want to get into the specifics, because obviously that's there's a lot of
right. It's a personnel
sensitivities
matter.
around
You
that.
have to be careful. Yes.
But is there a time period after which somebody is out that they would go on a long-term disability, where we would actually the payments would kick over to the insurer, or?
Well, I will say this. I will say this, and obviously Mr. Cronin can chime in if he wants to. The select board is aware of the situation, and is they have to decide how they're going to handle it from a personnel point of view.
But it hasn't moved anything yet. It's still just
nothing has moved yet, is my understanding. So.
And then this extra hour, that's overtime?
No. Donna is working 40 hours a week now, and it was 35, I think.
Okay, so the extra hours is just within her 40 hours.
It's within
Yeah,
the
she
40
wasn't working 40
hours.
hours
It's just
before.
more hours than she has been working.
But not hitting overtime. Okay, great.
Not any overtime.
Okay, any further discussions on this one? Now, the only thing I would note about this, and we don't have to deal with this tonight, but from the select board's point of view, when we're talking about next year, and again, because it's a personnel matter, I won't discuss, I'll let them hash it out on their own. But if there's going to be a financial impact for next year, then that's something that, they can update us on when they have guidance, but it's something we're going to want to know before we finalize the 21 budget plan. So
Ken, if I could just
Yep.
briefly, something.
Can I ask a question? Does this affect the 1/12 budget for July, or are you not looking at? It doesn't? Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Cronin.
No, I just wanted to let your committee know that in a spirit of transparency, I'll communicate to you any personnel details, and we can then work collaboratively to make sure that we share public information as it needs to be distributed to your committee. But at this time, I think you're right. It's best to let this play out, and we'll monitor it, and we'll report back any changes that may affect the budget in FY21.
Okay.
We did talk about it today, so your committee understands. I passed along those details as they're known to me, and I think they should just stay between us for the most part.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I don't want to breach any personnel related issues. Okay, so does anybody have any other questions about this transfer? This one's much more straightforward and doesn't involve a crappy warranty. So okay, so if that's the case, then here's the motion that I'll entertain for a line item transfer in the amount of $1,700 from liability insurance 01945 object 57400 to select board clerical organization 01122 object 51113.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so Tim and Sue on that one. Okay, any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yep.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. That goes in the to be signed pile. Okay, now the last one that we have, and this is the one we've already discussed a little bit about, and I know Mr. Murphy had more comments on. So now we're at the big kahuna, which is the transfer for the professional and technical stuff, the lawyers and everything else. So the form that I have, just to be clear to everybody, so we're all on the same playing field here, the form that I have is for $44,500. Now, Sharon has said that will come down, and we'll talk about that in a minute as to how far it comes down. Let's see where it comes down before we decide, because if we do need a new form, right? Actually, if we do need a new form, we can get a new form, is my point. So before we talk about transferring 44.5, but okay, so we had started this discussion before, which was about the lawyers and everything else. So I know, Mr. Murphy, you had a question, so go ahead.
I do. The spreadsheets Sharon sent over today, which included the 2020 and the 2019 professional tech, when they did an analysis between the two, it's a $28,902 difference. What had we budgeted for FY19? Do you know, for professional and tech services? For
38,393.
38,000?
Yeah, it's on the spreadsheet.
Oh. So the total right now sitting in that bucket, according to the numbers,
well, okay, so hold it. Are you talking about, that was FY19, right? For FY20, the budget was
she sent over both. I'm sorry.
53,000. So if you look at each tab, right at the bottom of the list she's got there, she's got the original budget.
Okay.
And then we did a reserve fund transfer for the Lord, right?
Yeah, that was the Green Street stuff, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
so we knew it was, we did that, and so.
Okay. So my question I was pointing out, though, is does that bottom line of 105,000 include all the transfers and adjustments that Jeff was mentioning to Sharon on Monday night to the select board?
Yes. Yes.
So that's the bottom final number is 105.
Yes. I moved anything that could have been to conservation or planning or zoning. I took that out and then redid the list. And then earlier today, I found out that the bills for Beacon that are still here, I can transfer over to the grant that we got, because the second half of the grant is a reimbursable thing. I had them because there was only like $2,500 available in the grant from the first payment that we got. The second half is a reimbursable thing. So I can take that other $9,900 out of their budget and put it in the grant, which will lower this one more time. So I can give you an updated form. I'll give you an updated form to the selectmen next Monday, and then you guys can have an updated one for next Tuesday, which will be far lower than what I originally gave you.
Then I would suggest, Ken, that's what we do. We just wait until next week after the select board has reviewed and approved the revised corrected amount. So rather than us transferring.
Just so we just, or because we're here, I mean, look, this is, I think we all know that there's regardless of how low we get it, it's still a pretty big overage, for the year. And I just, going forward, I think that we really need to work on a better system of sort of notifying us as these things are going on, especially sort of, ongoing litigation. Not that we need the details of the litigation or the essentially confidential stuff, but more like, we're working on a property case or something like that. And it's we're receiving bills racked up that we weren't expecting, about $5,000, just, kind of things like that. And we just sort of, to be surprised with I know it's not $44,000 because we kind of know about some parts of it, and it's, but it's probably in the 20s, some odd $1,000, I think, is the way I did the math last week. That's a significant sort of overspend to sort of come up in front of us at the last minute. And I think that we just all can agree that the better communication, I think can solve a lot of these problems going forward.
Yeah. Mr. Cronin.
To Mr. Alfred's point, Ken, the way I look at the differences between 19 and 20, they're captured in three distinct financial buckets, which I think your committee knew broadly about. There's one item that I think you and I spoke about earlier today that I was able to determine you were not aware of. but you were aware that we were contracting with Paradigm Associates for a search for a town administrator.
Mhm.
And word was passed through your committee that we were going to settle with a firm, as Sharon indicated earlier, for Sun Edison. The value of that legal work was $10,000. That piece, I believe, if Mr. Ritter and or Mr. Aroni did not pass it along to you, would be the only item, Mr. Alfred, that, as far as I can tell, was not passed along to your committee, the $10,000 legal fee for Sun Edison. The other project should have been known to you folks.
Which one? I mean, I'm just so I knew. Obviously, we knew about Paradigm, and that's where I was backing out and saying it wasn't the full $40,000. It was getting close.
So
to
we're
20.
roughly out of balance by about 37,000. 10 of it is Beacon, and that's the work that Sharon indicated is going to be booked off. That's moving off to a grant. That's the company we're using to do the solar project. Paradigm's 10, and a firm called Weltman and Associates had to be hired through Tallerman and me to represent us in New York on the solar case. So the settlement was paid for by a different account. That's the 20,000. But the legal fees, I think, was the only item from this list, Dan, that from what I can detect was not properly notified. Oh, you guys were not properly notified. Jeff isn't here to say that he did or not, but I looked through some emails that Mr. Aronian informed me about, and I didn't see any notice that there were legal fees attached to that settlement. Obviously, no, and that's 10 grand.
Let's just try to make sure that we're communicating all of this as best as possible, and move forward.
Yep. Okay, Sue, you had a question?
Not so much a question. I was just going to leverage what Dan mentioned. I think what might be helpful, and I think what we've done in the past, at least a few years ago, was to have maybe quarterly updates on where we are from a legal perspective. So things that can be discussed, even just at a high level, of where we are, status, are we, all the way through, most of the way through, partially, and then that just gives us a sense of sort of where we are, and then if there may be some overages coming down the pike.
Agreed. Yep, I think I would agree with you.
Okay, so on this one, we'll defer this one until we get an updated form next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Sharon, if you're still on the call, I just want to clear up, Ken. Sharon, you need to move any related costs for Beacon off to that grant,
I will do that. Yep.
and clean up the total bottom line, which will look something more like 2027 or so.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay, let me just check here. Okay, that's good. Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate or concur with what Sue said, just that one of the things S&P recommended is have regular updates, and this is if we did a regular update of where we stand from a budgetary standpoint every quarter, it would give us insights into what it is, plus it would make S&P happy that we're doing our due diligence and we're looking at the balances and see anything that are skewing or miss, and then we're informed. So I would suggest next year we have, and we talk to the new administrators, that we get a regular quarterly update of the financials. Where do we stand versus what was budgeted?
Ken, as I think about this, it's a great idea, obviously, and it's so commonsensical. It may be that after we're done with town meeting, that we have a meeting between the finance committee and the select board, bring the new town administrator, and bring up areas that the two boards can begin building those kind of new meetings or disclosure processes, so that he can hear directly from you folks what you're looking for. And we can then talk through with him what kind of resources he might need to achieve that. So this might be one of many things that both boards could definitely start a dialogue with the new town administrator to help build that bridge back up. So let's talk about that after July. Sometime in August seems like a logical time to have that kind of an administrative catch up.
Okay. Okay. So as far as the transfers and the select board are concerned, that's the only thing I had for them tonight. anything else, the paperwork will come. Is there anything else, Sharon, transfer-wise, regarding the select board that we need to discuss while we have them here? Like, am I going to get more forms next week, or just an updated form for this last transfer?
You will get an updated form for the Board of Selectmen for this. The other forms that you have in your box are all transfers within the same department, taking from one, what I call one bucket to another, from purchase services to supplies or vice versa. All the other transfers in your box are within their own department.
Okay.
Nothing else is going between departments.
Okay. Sue, you have a question?
Just a quick question. So I just wanted to remind you about Mark's question from Park and Rec on the touchless faucets, and whether that should go, should we be looking at that through this process, even though it may be reimbursed through the CARES Act? I just want to make sure we talk about that, because the camp is sort of starting soon. So.
Okay. So I was going to put that later in the agenda, but this is as good a time as any because we're talking about transfers. Just to update, and I don't know to what extent, does Vin know about this tour, or did it just go to you, Sue?
No, it went to both Vin and I. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I was on my phone when I forwarded it.
If you want to give why don't you give the committee the quick overview of the situation, and we'll talk about what we want to do about it. Oh, how come she's not
Sorry.
muted?
No, I muted myself. Sorry, my headset. Mark Frank had actually reached out about looking to having touchless faucets, the ones that would have the sensors installed at Stoddard Park, so that they can reduce the number of high-touch surfaces for camp in light of COVID. And they have a quote for those of $1,900 to have them installed. And so he was wondering whether it was realistic to think that maybe we could get it covered by the CARES Act, or maybe by FEMA's relief funds. But anyway, so I wanted to just bring it up with our group and get perspective. And
Well, today we have all the right people. So Chief Cassidy, the first question, if you're listening, his first question is, would something like that in your mind qualify as a CARES reimbursable expense?
It would potentially be an eligible both under FEMA as well as then CARES. So because it's a purchase of equipment, then it would be 75% would be FEMA if determined to be eligible, and therefore we could use CARES to pick up the remaining 25%.
Okay. So the select board obviously can't deliberate because they're not posted for tonight, but since all three of them are on this call and listening, you're the final arbiters and controllers of that CARES money. So, speaking for yourself, Mr. Cronin, do you believe that that's something, because from our perspective, from my perspective, it seems directly, again, we have this whole question of what does the auditor think, but I'm looking at saying we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the specific need to reduce high touch surfaces because of COVID. And it's also $1,900 total. So it's not, even if the 25% comes out of there, we're talking about $500.
Yeah.
But,
Speaking for myself, I would say it would. Incidentally, last Monday evening, we did talk with Chief Cassidy. I don't want to speak for you, Mike, but we did set up a protocol to allow him to receive any new requests and present them to us on a periodic basis for approval. Our goal is to be lenient, but also achieve the purpose and intent of the CARES Act. So there's some headspace in that grant. We want to use it to the benefit of the town. So I would say yes, Ken.
okay.
so just have Mark go to Mike then?
I was going to say, have him follow
Okay.
the protocol. Yeah.
Thank you. I will do that.
Okay. So, okay, that's good. That's one less thing for us to do. So, okay. So anything else before we move on to the next thing, which is basically the warrant, because we have the select board here to talk about anything. And I'm going to try to pull up my copy of the warrant, the last version we had. So now I would say for reference tonight, we will use the warrant as sent out by Donna last Monday, which would have been the 15th, I think, was when it was sent out. So you all should have that. In fact, I'll tell you when I can find it here. I'll find tell you when the email was sent. Let's see.
I have one dated the 16th.
Is it the 16th? Maybe it was the 16th.
Did Jeff sent out?
No,
Both?
that's what I said, not the one Jeff sent out. The
One's a
one
PDF and one's a Word.
I have a scanned PDF that Don
Yes,
sent out.
it was sent out on June 16th at 12:03 p.m. Okay, so that's the one we will use as the reference for the discussion tonight. Okay, so with that in mind, okay, I'll open it up. The whole point of this was to allow the committee to exchange of information, basically allow the committee to ask any questions of the select board and allow the select board to present any information they wanted to on the articles that they are in charge of. So anybody, I would say just go through the warrant. When you find an article you want to say something about, just raise your hand and we'll start talking about it. Because this, yes, Mr. Whitaker.
Is there any way?
You don't have the email.
Okay. Never mind.
Do you have access to your town email yet, Mark?
I do not, no.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to think. If you want to, in the chat, you can give me your email, and I can forward this copy to you. Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
Could we just someone share their screen so that Mr. Whitaker can follow along?
Well, I could do that, but the problem is, okay, I was going to do that, but when I share it, then I lose sight of everything. I can't see who's raising hands and stuff. So
sorry.
Let me see if I can share.
Send him an email.
One of us could share our screens. That way you don't lose sight of everything.
Well, I think, okay, go try. I don't know if you share, whether it's going to block my screen anyway, because you're going to take over the participant screen, but you can give it a try. But the other thing, that's what I said, okay, I see it, Mark. I'll just forward you a copy of this.
When did Jeff send it out? Sorry.
It was Donna Muzzy sent it out
okay.
on June 16th.
Okay, thanks. Got it.
And I'm going to forward it to Mark right now. So,
Hey, Ken, while breaking the action, I wanted to take the opportunity to congratulate Mark on his election. Mark, welcome to the Finance Committee. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you, sir.
I second that. This is Tina Hine. Welcome, Mark.
well, Tina, you can't second it because you're not you're violation of the open meeting law. I'm just kidding. So.
I dare you. I dare you to.
So a question, so you guys.
Well played, Ken.
So a question on 26. You guys are still figuring out whether we need to put on the revenue for the sustainability coordinator from the electric aggregation program, but wasn't there
That's a good question, but let me do one thing first. Mr. Cronin, do you want to give us updates on things that have changed since the 16th?
Ugh.
Well, I'm just saying with regards to the warrant, because you mentioned a couple of things that are probably going to change. So it might be helpful for people to know that before we drill into things that may or may not be going away.
Sure. We were informed that the article regarding electricity aggregation is not needed. That will be brought up before our board to perhaps strike it. I'm just looking to see if I have the right number, Ken. I think it's
That's what I was trying to.
back end.
So just a couple of, where does that money go as far as to be spent on the sustainability coordinator?
Are you talking about the electricity aggregation?
Yeah.
It'll go to the fund.
Where? Sorry, you broke up. The general fund.
Right now, it would go to the general fund. So
Okay.
what we would need to do, and this is something we'll have to discuss, we would need to, basically add a line item somewhere for this sustainability coordinator position and put it in the budget, put it in the omnibus.
Okay.
Article 26.
If I could just give some sort of feedback to the board, and I apologize, I didn't see you guys doing this in March. I have some just concerns about funding the position this way, and for a number of reasons. One, I mean, we can get into the whole how sort of this position was sort of brought up and brought to the town, and the funding behind it is this sustainable, self sort of funding-ish position. But regardless of that, with this particular, it's a unique way of doing it. But for instance, just this week I got in the mail a Constellation offer that is and I'm still trying to figure out, but if there's any sort of, how much of a, small text there is, but, it's 2 cents a kilowatt, or like almost, 15-20% below the town aggregation rate. If the sustainability coordinator is very successful and reduces the energy consumption in town, it feels like it's a funding source that we can't necessarily always rely on, and could, in theory, move around a lot, and leaves us susceptible to not having the funds there at some point in the future. So that I understand we're not voting on it, and so, but that's just sort of my feedback to you guys to sort of take into consideration.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Cronin.
So Dan, I hear you. If we strike Article 26, and we still obviously allow ratepayers in Holliston to opt into the program, the funds will be deposited into the general fund until and if Article 25, should it pass at town meeting, it would go to the general court to create a revolving fund for all revenues. So this would be the repository for, if you read the language in there, it includes net metering. So instead of going, if this were to be approved by the general court, those revenues in the future would be directed into that revolving fund.
Right. Well, and I have some questions about that revolving fund as well. But so okay. What you're saying, I guess, then, is that other revenues may eventually, from other projects in town, may eventually go to supporting the sustainability corridor, at least in your vision.
It could, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it did. With the language includes, for example, the solar facility rental receipts and other options.
Right. So, how much money do you think that will be flowing into that fund in a given year? Because what are your expectations for now? Back since 26 is basically struck, talking about 25. What do you think that the sort of the revenue stream or the pool of money that may be going into that revolving account could be?
It's hard to say. The net metering number is reported to be approximately $40,000.
Right.
The solar money, that depends on the contract that we'll sign with Sol Systems. That number has not been identified yet.
But that's a much bigger number, right?
It could be.
Yeah.
But it is what we make it to be. It's not a whole slice. Go ahead.
I mean, in reading it, it felt like there was minimal sort of who controls that revolving account? I mean, is it something that the spending out of needs to be brought through town meeting, needs to be brought to the finance committee? Who sort of authorizes spending through that from that account ultimately?
Town meeting. It'll be part of the annual revolving fund article that town meeting approves. So that'll go through you folks.
No, but
I was going to say that doesn't. I think he's talking about spending from the fund. What's the approval? Who approves spending from that fund? Because the town meeting just authorizes the funds, and authorizes the existence of the revolving fund, but doesn't control the direct spending from it.
And I just noticed that one of the things that's pretty clear in there is that there's no limit to the amount of money that can be spent out of there, in any given year.
Wouldn't town meeting provide those limits, Dan, as they do in the article?
That not the way this is written, John. Just to be clear, that the way this article is written, it says explicitly in the request of the legislation there should be no annual expenditure limit for this fund. So the way this is written, it is unlimited.
Yeah, I don't like that. You should know one of the items that I'm looking for clarity on this article involves sort of the legal interpretation. When Lisa McGovern, I think her name was, the counsel with Tellerman Mead came before us, we simply wanted a straight out revolving fund, just like everyone else has. And she flagged us and said, no, it cannot be like all your other revolving funds. For this purpose, it needs to be a special act. And she went on. She was very insistent, using models from other communities. I'm still not settled, to be quite honest with you, that a special act is the way to go. And this afternoon, I spoke to Kate Federoff, and I said, I need to make this abundantly clear. We're not looking to fund people, like personal services, with this. It's a contract. Matt is a contracted individual, and he's no different than a service contract or any other revolving fund. She's going to ask her colleague Lisa to revisit this because the special act to me seems to be a hard reach for what we're trying to resolve here. We were simply looking to create a tool that the sustainable coordinator could use to receive the benefit of savings and costs associated with his or her work. There would obviously be some controls placed on the expenditure. So I can follow up with you, Ken, on this if you like, but
yeah.
The intent is clear to give spending authority towards this position from revenue collected. But I hear Dan's question.
So my concern is that there's sort of, it feels like it could, in theory, I mean, if we do more solar projects and things, it could turn into a rather sizable sum of money that has limited controls. And I don't think anyone's doing anything untoward. I'm just trying to make sure that, especially for future, as we do seek these types of things, that we probably put a limit to the size of the revolving account, with the rest going to the general fund, and then some other sorts of limits on spending or things like that. Just to
that would be the right way to do it. But I have some unanswered questions in my brain about looking at this, because we are expecting. I got a number today from the solar vendor. If the town adopts the article in this warrant to extend the pilot to 25 years, the town could be looking at over $500,000 in new revenue. Year. It would not be my expectation that money would flow into the revolving fund. That money,
the way it's written,
it would.
It could. Yeah, you're right. And I guess that's something we've got to clean up with Tallerman.
Yeah. So I think in general, I think that some sort of fund could definitely be supportable. I just think we would want to sort of not build a potentially, what is that? A $12 million fund over 25 years, granted. So it would never be $12 million. But I can see there's some light in your eyes there, funding many different things. But I mean, that's just we just want to make sure that we're. So that's my feedback.
Okay. Yep. So. Sue, you had a question.
Not on this topic. So if Finn's question is on this topic, I'm happy to wait.
Okay, Finn, are you on
this? It is on this. Yes, it is on this topic. My question now, I know John and I spoke about this, but as we develop through this and hearing what Dan's been talking about, do we really need to have this paid through the revolving fund versus just having part of the omnibus? I think it would be more control if it's part of the omnibus rather than having it on the revolving fund, in my opinion, because what are we looking to come out of the revolving fund other than this person's salary or contract payments? Is this going to be allowed to be used for other expenses? In which case, why?
Go, John.
No, Vin, I agree with you. One of the reasons why we were exploring the revolving fund was because we were back to the intent of the position, to be self-funding. We were looking for a repository for the savings associated with the work that the sustainability coordinator creates. That's all. But if it is your committee's desire to look past the fact that you would have to create a line item somewhere, select board somewhere, fund an annual amount not to exceed to permit the position to exist, and then any other projects that he or she wants to create, like you would any other budget.
Right.
I wouldn't object to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would think.
That sounded too much like what we did not talk about, if you follow me.
No, I mean, that's how I was, because I didn't realize how much money we're talking. I totally think that's a better approach now. We're talking about more money. Plus, from my understanding, we want to have this person around longer than just a few years. My initial approach was, well, show me the money. Where have you saved us? And so that's just a justification. The person would have to show, yeah, this is the reason why we're doing this. I've saved all the town this much money or that much money. So that was the original selling to me, why I thought this was a good.
In other words, come in every year for the finance committee and present dollars out.
Yes.
I thought they were going to do that this year, though, because Ken, I had told you someone had emailed me and was going to get me some information, and then they said they weren't because someone was going to present overall to the finance committee on what they've actually done. Is that what you said would be done next week?
Correct. That was originally scheduled for tonight. And that's why I said I know a couple of people from the people of the climate action group are on the call. But that's why I said at the beginning, right? Matt emailed me and said he wasn't going to be able to make tonight. You know, his defense, he told me several days ago. I just didn't think to, you know, but yeah, he's going to be here next Tuesday. So that's exactly why he's coming in to give us an update on what he's, you know, we had all had these questions about the whole idea of it being a no pun intended, a sustainable position, right? So that's what he's going to come in and talk to us about, what he's been doing, what the plan is, and kind of to discuss more the actual intended ROI from the position.
I think we should get these updates annually.
Yeah, we should get them anyway. But,
probably biannually, but yeah.
So, okay. Michelle, you had a question.
Well, I still have mine, unless we're still on this topic. So
well, that's why I said I'm assuming. Tell me if it's not on this topic. Just say so.
It's not on this topic.
Okay. What about you, Tim? You got to unmute.
Sorry. I actually really like Ben's proposal to put this just as a line item on the budget, and you know, it's just a purchase service like a lot of other purchase services. I think that is a good control. That seems a lot more reasonable than petitioning the general court to create a revolving account for this.
Yeah. Okay. So, and potentially that's one less article we have to deal with at town meeting. So that's a good thing. Okay. So.
Now I can go.
Okay.
And
so
I would echo with Tim. I agree with Tim too, and Ben. Okay. But my question actually, John, was around the rail trail, and I think we had them come in last year for some funds, and then now they're coming back for some additional funds, and just maybe a little bit more clarity on, is this an annual thing? Will we be establishing a revolving fund? Is there going to be an account set up for them, et cetera?
Okay, before you answer that, John, I'll tell you that I already reached out to Robert Wideneck because we had this question last week, and his response was, yeah, we're going to have this thing every year because we have, you know, ongoing maintenance costs for the trail. And that's when I said to him, then this should be stuck in the omnibus somewhere, right? If there's no reason for a separate article, and you know, this idea that you come in and ask for 1,000. Now, obviously, up to the select board to decide whether they want to do an article, but again, this is something that should be somewhere in the omnibus. So go ahead, Mr. Cronin.
No, I would agree with you, Ken. The $1,000 sue is for tools. I believe Mr. Henderson indicated it was also to replace a piece of equipment that he has personally loaned. It's a brush cutter to the rail trail. You know, we should have a conversation once we reform and we focus on how the trail is maintained. When I came in a couple of years ago, I suggested we evaluate the possibility of putting the trail and its maintenance under Public Works. And that's in no way meant to diminish the work that the rail trail volunteers do. But there needs to be some kind of a sustainable arrangement to make sure that the right equipment, the right licensed people are caring for that public space like they would any other public space. It's just one of those items that hasn't really pivoted. And in Holliston, you know, we embrace our volunteers and the great work they do. There has not been a move from the volunteers, Mr. Wideneck and his crew, to relinquish or say, hey, no mas, you know, we'd like Public Works to do this from now on. But I think we should start talking about that as a programmatic evolution since the trail was taken over a couple of years ago.
Do we have a list of what aside from the equipment, I guess, well, what the equipment is, the cost, and then the other items that they need? Did they give that to you, or could we get a copy of that?
I didn't get that from Robert. I don't know if John got that. So.
No, they didn't give us a full list. They described the equipment, Sue. It was a brush cutter and some other miscellaneous tools. So honestly, I don't have a report on the details.
Okay. Tim and Michelle, are you still, is this on your topic?
Yes.
No.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
I actually really do like the idea of incorporating this into an operating budget, even if it goes under Parks and Recs as this, you know, this volunteering to help our green spaces. There's a lot of trail work throughout the whole Eastern U.S., and I think this would, finding a way to be able to use our volunteers and at the same time fund the equipment so personal equipment's not being used, I think is important. So yeah. I really do. Excellent.
Right, and I'll get you in a second, John. I agree, right? This is not in any way a slight on the volunteers. It's just that, you know, it is one of these things where if it is going to be, and this is what I said to Robert, if it is going to be something where when we first, there was the initial $5,100, remember that we bought some stuff at Stradford DPW, then there was $1,000 last year. And that's why I kind of said to him, if the intent is you're going to be looking for an article for $1,000 every year, this should be built into a budget somewhere. So, okay, Mr. Cronin.
No, I was going to, you know, I don't mind the dialogue about separating it out. I would encourage your committee to think about the proper location. I personally believe it should not be under Parks and Rec. I think Parks and Rec should be in the recreational business and in parks programming, but maintaining parks, I think, has been a constant issue. Again, we haven't focused on this in the last 2 years, but personally, the rail trail needs a lot of manual labor on an annual basis to maintain a hardscape, maintain landscape, and all of the infrastructure that goes with it. It's strictly a public works thing. So, Tim, unless you had a strong opinion, it's a policy question, but I really believe it's a highway or / DPW infrastructure arrangement. We can get to this down the road. It's not something we're going to solve tonight, but I do think down the road we should be thinking about that kind of an investment.
Okay, Mr. Alfred, I assume you're on this topic.
Just on this, I do worry. I want to sort of formalize it some way, but I worry if we bring it in and make it an account and sort of a function within a department, we could lose some of the volunteer. I don't. It could start to be that there are actually laws that kick in. I mean, you do have union labor in the DPW. But I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but it's just before we actually do that, I would just encourage the select board to
make sure there aren't any gotchas.
Are you thinking that the Friends has to dismantle potentially? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how, if you start sort of using some town labor or some town, like real town owned equipment to do it, it could start to trip some sort of issues. I don't know for sure, but I just think that we want to be careful before doing that, because I don't disagree that would be the ideal. But if you, for $1,000, to get the town doing a little bit, but then we somehow trip up and we lose all the volunteer, or they feel like it's now town or something that the town is doing, so they shouldn't need to do it anymore, and or make those donations. I just we just want to be careful, because I've seen it. The volunteers and the amount of work that they do to keep that trail up is incredible, and is would be very expensive to replace in full. So.
Maybe to that point, we leave this as a warrant article for several years until we do figure out how to.
Right.
$1,000. I don't have any problem just leaving for now. I mean, it is, and just understanding is now that it is going to be recurring. I don't think first we thought it was going to be recurring.
Right. And that's why I said I don't think procedurally, if we have an article for $1,000 right now while this is being sorted out, fine. But I think that there is a longer term evaluation that needs to be done, just because. And again, in the end, you could just do an article for $1,000 every year, but it just seems like that's kind of like there's got to be a more efficient way than having an article that everybody's got to vote on every year. So
yeah.
Okay. So anything more on this particular topic?
No.
Okay, then Michelle, you had another topic.
Yeah, I just had a question about the petition article. I wanted to know, because it mentions the animal control officer, and I wanted to know if that changes our agreement with Ashland at all. If it's going to cost us more money, if it's something that the FinCom has to look at.
Michelle, we haven't heard anything from the petitioners. I spoke to council today about that article to find out if we could move it. The answer was yes, we could, but it has to be with the agreement of the petitioner. But other than that, they did have a conference call with us earlier this year. They laid out their case. They have strong feelings about it, but we have not evaluated this in terms of financial impact. I don't recall hearing the animal control officer have any concerns about the request or the costs associated with our agreement with Ashland. Okay.
I mean, there was a business impact, right? They did run one business out of business, I guess, at least.
Do we actually have a business subject to this right now in town?
I don't think so.
Currently, there was Pick-a-Pup is basically was their target, and they're trying to sort of codify that they couldn't come back, I guess.
And they're closed.
And they're closed now, yeah.
Okay, well, that's what I was saying. It's not, it doesn't impact any existing business in Holliston.
No.
Right, but I just wanted to make sure that Ashland wouldn't take a look at it and say we have to renegotiate or, or else
Yeah.
we don't have to vote on it or make any recommendation if it doesn't affect, any financial impact on the town.
We're not aware of any.
Is it
Okay,
a binding
thank you.
article? It's binding, as far as we know?
Well, it would be a bylaw.
Right. Because
Oh, okay, yeah.
well, actually, it's not. It says it's an ordinance. I don't know what that means technically for us in the sense that how ordinances are handled.
You can't change the wording of a petition article.
No, but I'm just saying that I'm looking at the article and it says the ordinance proposed for the Holliston town meeting is as follows. So again, I don't know what we don't tend to have ordinances. We have bylaws. And
Well, and under penalties, it actually refers to it as a bylaw with a violation. I'm just curious if a petition article can actually enact something that subjects the town to imposing a fine on somebody. I don't know.
yeah, well, I guess, again, I think the select board needs to, maybe that's something town council weighs on in their review of the warrant. Because
Well,
I think the big question is, without going down to the nitty gritty, we need somebody with some legal mind to assess whether it's going to pass muster, right? That's the bottom line. Because if it isn't, if somebody says, hey, there are flaws in here, the AG would never allow this, right? Because it tries to usurp authority or whatever, then that's something we would want to know. Because if we're at a town meeting where we're trying to do it expeditiously, we don't have a 20-minute debate on an article that means nothing, right? Or that would be thrown out by the AG.
Well, my concern was, do we have to make a recommendation on it? If there's no financial impact, we don't need to vote on it.
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do, but I'm just saying procedurally, given the desire to make town meeting go quickly, right? That would be relevant, not for us financially, but for probably the select board to get an opinion on. Because again, it's one of these things where it's kind of like the surcharge on the electric bill, right? It's probably like the same thing, right? Why have a 20-minute debate about something that's already done and doesn't, the select board's already used their authority to implement it, right? So there's no point. Why would you want 100 people sitting there discussing an article where their debate and their vote has no impact, right? So that's all I'm saying is that whether you're for or against this, if there are technical problems with it that are going to prevent it from being implemented, even if everybody in town supports it, right? Then we should at least know that up front so that we don't waste time on it at town meeting, or at least we can state that up front that, hey, there are technical problems with this. So, but you're right. Financially, I don't think it has an impact on us, on the town. So I don't think we need to weigh in on it. Any other articles? I do want to make two quick comments, and John, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, Mr. Maxwell, go ahead.
Sorry. So I can totally take these conversations offline, but I definitely had questions about Articles 21, 20, and 19. With 21, we're doing a retroactive road acceptance. Why retroactive as opposed to from this point forward? And my only concern.
Good question. Go ahead, Mr. Cronin.
That item has been an enigma wrapped in a riddle. Mr. Ritter explained to us Monday night that, Tim, those are actions that are long overdue for road acceptances that have been outstanding for about 10 years. We have not heard much more from the town administrator or DPW about these articles. And frankly, we were staring at them as possibly lifting them out until we got more clarity on their need and urgency for this town meeting.
I totally understand accepting roads. The retroactive part grabbed my attention.
Well, there is one thing I wanted to ask about this, or at least communicate to the select board.
Mm-hmm.
There are two roads that I haven't looked at a map recently, and I'm not an expert in every street in Holliston, but I know that two of them are in Hoppingbrook. But then there are other two that I thought, like Deer Run and Indian Ridge Road South, aren't those over in near the Ashland line somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Like over in the Bafford development or something like that?
They're off Marshall.
Oh, they're off Marshall.
Yeah,
Okay.
close to Milford.
Okay, can I tell you what my concern with accepting a road retroactively, that all of a sudden the town's going to get a bill for the snow plowing that the residents have been paying all
Yeah.
those years?
Yeah.
Or any other cost, right, that we just don't know about.
That's my concern.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, this retroactive piece, I was just more concerned about what are these roads, because the only reason I wanted to be clear was because I know there are roads that we meaning the town, has purposely not accepted in the past for various reasons. They were not built to the right specifications. They, they're subject to other issues, right? And I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't, just going back and saying, oh, we never accepted these roads, and that we're clear that maybe there was a reason why they weren't accepted, right, in the first place.
Yep, I hear you.
But yes, to Michelle's point, obviously the retroactive nature of it is a problem too. But we've communicated that to the select board. Let's let them decide whether they want to proceed with that.
Yep.
Hey, Mr. Maxwell, you still have more articles, so keep going.
Sorry. So working backwards, Article 20, we're going to transfer 50,000 into Middlesex retirement. Is that what we want to do at this point, considering future of Middlesex retirement and our involvement with it?
Are you asking me, Ken, were you going to speak, or did you want me to speak?
I was thinking about it, but I figured I'd let you answer first, because I think he's asking you, right, Mr. Maxwell?
Yeah. So, Tim, we've got a response from our outside consultant on this, that notwithstanding any concerns about the solvency of the Middlesex County retirement account, which, according to our outside consultant, is quite strong, they strongly recommend that we transfer this money into the fund. I believe Mary was planning to join the call tonight to make a stronger case for this than I can, because she had the conversation with this outside consultant, but she had a family emergency tonight and couldn't join us. If Sharon is still on the line, I don't know, Sharon, were you privy to any dialogue with Mary on that topic that you can share? If not, don't worry about it.
We talked about, well, one we talked about with you the other night is to actually change it so it doesn't actually say Middlesex. But I think our whole purpose of this is if we start funding this, as opposed to Mary just making that yearly payment that she does, if we can start putting this in a special stabilization account, she can invest it like she does with OPEB and everything else. So we're going to get a better return on our money. And then when we make a payment to the, county retirement, we're getting just more bang for our buck. If we have the money set aside and we're investing it, we can put in larger payments to offset our liability like we do with OPEB. That was the whole point.
Are you suggesting that she redrafted the language for this particular article, Sharon?
I'm not sure how much the only thing that I know Mary changed was we just wanted to make it more of a stabilization for retirement, for pension, the pension obligation, as opposed to specifically saying Middlesex. I know there's been talk that, Middlesex was not in a good position. I did read the email that she got back from Middlesex saying, no, we are quite solvent and it's not what everybody thinks it is. And, it's a whole reporting thing on what gets shown and what doesn't get shown, which kind of skews, I guess, their position. That said, we thought it would be, I guess, prudent in the event something did happen, whatever, if anything got reconfigured in this state, as opposed to specifically saying Middlesex County retirement, we thought it was going to be a better thing to just say this was to fund our pension liability.
Okay. So Vin, I assume you want to comment on this particular topic. Yeah, go ahead.
I do. Thank you. My concern is putting into a stabilization fund isn't the way to do it. I think if we want to do it, we should go and get a special legislation just like we did for OPEB. It'll give us more flexibility of what we can invest it in, and it truly will be something for retirement. My concern with tying up money for this retirement is right now it's not our responsibility. Yes, it is, but it's not at the same time. It's the Middlesex County retirement. I think we'd be better off telling the retirement board that they should start funding it more actively and requesting more funds, because I read what he said. I read the email. It was forwarded to us. And I'm He's just playing with semantics. It is not, it's underfunded. It has a huge liability, and they keep kicking the can down the road of when they're going to actually start funding it. And that's what S&P was concerned about, at least how I understood it, that we have this huge thing coming due sometime, and we owe it to these people who worked here that the money should be, it should be funded better than what it has been. Now he says, oh, it's not insolvent. Of course it's not insolvent, but it will be, because the retirement, those baby boomers and all the other people are retiring, and then is going to live for a longer age, and it's going to be upside down later.
Yes, well, I just want to add one thing. What I thought was funny about the response was the response basically said, hey, GASB doesn't give us credit for future payments, and that's why it looks the way it does, right?
Well, it's not.
But then I sat there and I said, yeah, but GASB also not charging you for future accrual of benefits, which is going to happen too. So they're estimating the benefits based on the population now, but you're going to have new hires and other things like that that are going to add to the liability. So anyway.
Well, what of the proposal to eliminate the word Middlesex from the article? Does that change your thinking, Vin?
No, I still think it's not really a right place to put it. I think we really should do similar to what we did for OPEB if we're going to go down this path, is getting a whole new fund for this retirement, just not a stabilization fund. It should be similar to OPEB. You know, we have a separate bucket, it's given different liabilities and different actuarial things, and it gives more flexibility to the investments. At least that's my understanding. She's limited to what she can invest it in. Now, I could be wrong.
Stabilization fund, there are restrictions on what.
Yeah, so versus what, if you're looking at a true retirement, you're gonna have long-term, and it's not just for things that are liquid. So I think it would behoove us to go down that path and think about it.
Now, the other thing I wanted to point out to everybody is, if you didn't read the email, right, one of the questions was, where's the $50,000 coming from? And if you look, I think the intent, the 50,000 was the intent of, that's approximately what our credit is, right? But our credit is 43, it's in the email, it's 43,000 something, almost 44,000. So, you know, from the point of view of, does it change the budget? If the change, right now we have an appropriation, we get the credit by paying it up front, we apply that credit towards our unfunded liability. The change would be zero net budget, in the sense that we'd still have the same appropriation. We would make the payment, but instead of applying the credit to our unfunded liability with Middlesex, we would basically take that money back and put it here. So the other part of this is that we say 50,000 in there, but the right amount might be whatever it is. You know, the guy said it's 2% of your allocation or whatever. So we can actually put the precise number in there and say that's how it's going to be funded. We're just going to take that money back now instead of crediting it and put it in a separate fund. So, but to Vin's point, yes, that is something to consider, because you know, that's kind of what we were, you know, last week you weren't here, Mr. Cohen, but that's kind of what we were talking about last week was, you know, if we want to give ourselves the flexibility that we have with OPEB in terms of having the town control the investments and you know, invest it in a wise way with a target of preparing the town for this liability, we probably would want to go down the special legislation route, just literally model it right after the OPEB trust and just say it's a pension reserve trust or something like that. And, you know, you could even, in some sense, you could use the same board, right? You could use the OPEB, you could say it's managed by the OPEB trust board to manage the investments. So, but that, you know, again, your board can consider that, but that I think is the feedback Mr. Murphy wanted to give you. So.
I'll pass that along to Mary. I wish she was here, but we'll share her thoughts at some point down the road and figure out if there's a path forward that may include either pulling the article or modifying it. We'll check on that.
Okay. So do you still want something else, Vin?
Yes, I want to talk about CapEx, Article 14.
Okay, well, hold on one second. Hold on. Was that on your list, Tim? Because you had the floor. So 14 is okay? Okay, go ahead. So we'll move to Article 14.
The items that are less than $20,000, the senior center improvements and the $8,600 for the Washington Street improvements. Is there a way we can get that out of the CapEx budget? Because it seems small, and I know that it's made up of several different small things.
Well, No, the Park and Rec building isn't. That's
Oh.
actually to make it ADA compliant. I think that right now the ramp isn't.
Okay.
That one I had the same thought actually,
It was
Ben, on
bigger
the,
originally.
yeah, because of the stairs, but they took
Yeah.
those out. That one
Right.
I sort of saw it being okay because there's a long useful life for that. I forgot the senior center, whether or not they were truly repairs or if they were really capital items.
And I'm wondering, is it something we could have under the facility manager's purview versus a CapEx? Because it just seems so small.
Well, just to be clear, now we have to revisit this, but just keep in mind that just because it's in the capital article doesn't mean it has to come out of the capital expenditure fund, right? So you read the wording of the article, right? It says we can raise, transfer, whatever.
I know.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, as you recall, the senior center improvements were part of the 200,000 free cash we had put aside. We still have that 200,000 to do something with if we want to. So it can be in this list, but the motion can say that 12,000 and even the 8,600 if we want to comes out of the free cash.
No, we can't.
FY20.
No, we're in July.
Doesn't matter. That was the special, the law change gave us the ability to appropriate it for FY21.
Over 21, but not for, okay.
Right, that was, you're right. Under ordinary circumstances, we would not be able to do that. When they passed the emergency measures for COVID, one of the things in there was it made the free cash that would have had to be appropriated by the end of FY20 available for appropriate. You can appropriate for either year.
So are we going to do this with a branch to them?
Yes, that's what my hope is. Yeah, we give us the opportunity to do what we said we were going to do.
But that's not
The only difference with Up Branch was our original plan was to put it in the FY20 DPW budget, right? Now it's got to go in the FY21 budget because FY20 will be closed.
Right. Yeah. And so he hasn't been able to do the work either.
Right. So
you're suggesting, well, it's such a small amount, but I'll go with it but I think we need to tighten up what goes under CapEx. Just because
yes, we do.
It just seems why we're dealing with. And also, I thought Jeff was saying something about, well, I know there was a discussion on Monday regarding the water treatment plant, and it ended up like we really don't need the 54,500 there. Correct me if I'm wrong, John.
Okay, no, hold it. One thing I want to say just before we give it to John and James for comment. Let's be perfectly clear, because I've already run into this ambiguity once with somebody, right? There's the wastewater treatment plant that we already have that deals with wastewater.
Yes.
There's the water treatment plant that we have at several wells and the new one that's being built at well 5, okay? These are not the same thing. So this item that says wastewater treatment is not water treatment.
So it's for the schools. It is for the schools.
The other side.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead, Mr. Cronin, you wanted to talk about this? I know you had some information on it.
Which one first?
Wastewater.
Wastewater treatment plant.
Yes, the 54, whatever it is. 54.5.
The item that is shown in the warrant, we discussed on Monday. We were informed by Mr. Mr. Keast, is no longer needed. The proposed repairs are, in this case, not needed. So I don't know if they found other means to fund them. Mr. Keast is on the call. He can explain that. Mr. Ritter was uncertain on the value of how much to leave in the capital, and I asked him to square that away this week with Mr. Keast. So, if Mr. Keast is on the call, perhaps he can give you some.
James, you want to give us the update?
Yeah, the repairs that are immediate that need to be taken care of total about $5,000. Actually, just a little less than $5,000. The 54,000, Jeff was figured that it was related to a pump, which has already been replaced. I'm not sure how that funding was taken care of, but the 54,000 is not needed. Right now, it's about $5,000. And in talking to Mr. Ritter, he said if we wait till July 1st, that money can then come out of the wastewater treatment plant budget.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say the maintenance part should be in the budget. That's what we have the line item for.
Right, and this is a little more than just regular maintenance. These are some repairs. There's some ventilation blowers that are burnt out that need to get replaced. But again, it's not a significant amount of money, and it's certainly not $54,000 worth of money.
Okay, so yeah, so I guess we'll wait for clarity on that one. But yeah, the one thing I will say, James, is obviously, the part of the reason you're here is to evaluate these things. But I want to make sure we, at least from my perspective, and I think the committee's perspective, right? We want to be doing the right maintenance, right? It's not like we're trying to save a buck by letting something fall apart because we don't maintain it, right? So if it is the case that there's regular maintenance or some maintenance that should be done, then we want to know about it. We want you to turn around and say, oh, well, we can get rid of this because it'll get another, let's do the right maintenance. And obviously if we don't need to, we don't. These pumps, I think, are one of the most important things for you with regards to that plant, are one of the most important things to look at, because I know they have a certain lifetime. They fail every N years, and we usually have them, so that gets back to one of the reasons why you're here, right? That's one of those things where, we want to get into not just getting a call one day that says, oh, pump failed. We know they fail on a regular basis after several years. So.
No, absolutely. And that's part of my ongoing analysis now. I've actually have 2 experts that I'm working with in those plants to understand current state, what needs to get done. There's a proposal for redesign of the aeration chamber, and all that information I'm working on. But, my immediate look was, there's $54,000, being set aside for this particular warrant. Which isn't needed.
Okay.
I'm sure at some point, as I do more investigation into this plant, that we may come up with additional repairs and things that can then become on a future warrant, maybe in October or in spring. But right now, this $5,000 is needed to keep the plant going until we can, do further analysis on the overall condition and design.
Okay. Any other comments on the wastewater treatment? Okay. Any other questions on Article 14, the capital stuff? Go ahead, Tim.
I just wanted to kind of understand the issue with the radios. So
yes, well, that was going to be the next thing. Yes.
Pardon?
Go ahead. No, I was going to say that was next on my list. So go ahead. So
I saw the memo in the email increasing this from $283.20 to $23.36. And the reason was because we lost an earmark. Did we lose an earmark? What was it? Because we weren't fast enough? What happened there?
Yeah, I don't know who wants to talk to that. We have everybody who's affected by these radios on this call.
Okay, so I'll start off very briefly because I'll bring in our chiefs who are on the call. Tim, I believe you might be referring to a $100,000 ask that we made of our legislative peers, Senator Spilka and Representative Dykema. Each year ask us to fund various projects. We did ask for $100,000 in state funding to offset the cost of this project. We have not received that money yet, excuse me. But with regard to the total cost for the project, I'd ask Chief Cassidy and Chief Stone to weigh in. This project's been going on for quite a while, and I believe they have some information to share. Why don't we start with Chief Cassidy?
Okay.
Thank you. And Mr. Maxwell, I will agree with Mr. Cronin. We didn't lose an earmark. So towards the $383,000 project, we do have a $100,000 earmark from the legislature, which needs to be spent by next week. It has to be spent by June 30th. So take the 100,000 off of the 383,000 total project cost, and that leaves $283,000 in play. So that's why we're asking at the town meeting for the $283,000 appropriation from capital. If a couple months from now, we find out that the legislature had a special, rainy day fund that allowed us to get a second $100,000 earmark, then we would not need the full appropriation through capital. But right now, we can't guarantee we're going to get a second appropriation. So that's why we're asking for the $283,000 so that we can do this project this summer.
Okay. Now, one question I have, and this, I don't know if this is for you, Chief Cassidy, or for Chief Stone, because I know Chief Stone was the one that I brought up before, which is, you know me, right? The one thing that will make me go nuts about this is if we spend $383,000 to do this entire upgrade, to upgrade the system, provide the coverage and all this like this, and then within the next 5 years, I see a capital request for new radios because now we need radios to go with the system, and there's something else that changed, and we got to go from analog radios to digital radios and blah, blah, blah. So are we making sure that two things are happening? One is that this upgrade is fully compatible with the equipment we have now. And the second thing is that it's fully prepared for future equipment that we would have. Obviously, I'm not talking 50 years down the road. I'm talking about when the radios need replacing, right? We don't want to hear after doing this that we then have to buy, some special version of radio because this equipment we put in, is now obsolete or whatever. And only one manufacturer makes the radios that are compatible with it. So
I can absolutely speak to that, Mr. Chair. This will not require us to suddenly upgrade our equipment 18 or 24 months from now. This is compatible both with the current equipment that both the police and the fire departments are using, and this is also capable of any subsequent types of equipment. So you mentioned analog and digital. This equipment builds on the infrastructure of what we already have, and our repeaters, which are located at Mellon Street, do have dual transmission capability, so they can transmit both in analog and in digital mode.
Okay, good. And the other thing is, and I know this will make Sue happy, are we going to make sure that we have more than a 1-year warranty on $300,000 worth of equipment so that we're not being told a year from now that, oops, it was the wrong thing and we got to spend $70,000 to change it?
I can't speak to the warranty. I certainly can check with the vendor, and unfortunately, this is very similar to what you described earlier with traffic signalization. We've got equipment that's manufactured by Motorola. We've got microwave equipment, which is manufactured by a different manufacturer. It will then be installed by a vendor under state contract. So that's why when you look at the proposal that we gave you from back in February, you see different line items. And so Cybercom would be the vendor who's on state bid. The microwave would be the microwave components. And then the Motorola is some of the radio hardware itself that will do the comparator, which is going to basically to summarize for the committee. When a police officer on a motor vehicle stop on the west end of town, or when a firefighter inside a building keys up the microphone on their radio, what this new equipment will do is it will compare the signal strength at Hopping Brook, Jennings Road, Fairlane Way, and Mellon Street, and whichever one of those 4 receivers has the best signal, that will be the one that repeats out the transmission so that it is then received not only by any other field units, but also, and most importantly, by the communications centers at Washington Street and Central Street. Because right now, we have one repeater site on Mellon, and in a lot of areas, and that's what those colored maps showed, we've got areas where the signal drops off exponentially, and it's a personnel safety issue, because if a police officer needs backup because a car stop is going badly, or a domestic situation is deteriorating, or if a firefighter is encountering changing conditions inside a building, they need to be able to communicate that back to their comm centers.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about the need to fix the system, right? I think it's just making sure. And one last thing I was going to add, and I'll get to the questions, is this quote is from February, pre-pandemic. Have we tried to go back and be a little more aggressive on pricing, given that business conditions are probably substantially different than they were for these people in February?
Chief Stone did ask them to sharpen their pencil, and all of that pricing was state bid pricing. So they were already lower than manufacturers' recommended pricing, because as being state bid, it's a certain % off manufacturer's list. And then the hourly rate for a person who's going to climb a tower, they don't have control over that. That's, again, even a fourth party. So the Chief Stone did ask them to sharpen their pencil and lower the quote, and that really wasn't possible. They had already given us the lowest possible way to accomplish this project.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize for no video, but it's kids' bedtime. So we've been in constant contact with Cybercom, with the Motorola company, and I would just reiterate what Chief Cassidy said. This has kind of been a can that's been kicked down the bucket for a while, and it's a public safety issue for both police and fire. We've reached out to them. We've asked them to do the propagation study. We had the maps done. And if this wasn't an issue, if this wasn't something that was important to us, Chief Cassidy and I wouldn't be here tonight asking for this or requesting this. We've gone to them time and time again where you can cut and what you can do to simplify the project. But I think we're at the point now where we are facing a critical issue where we cannot communicate with our first responders on the street, whether it be police or fire. And I think it's our obligation as police and fire chiefs to bring the issue to both the Finance Committee and the Select Board to try to address this if we can.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, I don't think there's an issue. I don't think the Finance Committee is saying we don't see the need. I think it's just a matter of making sure, as I said, that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's with regards to getting the best deal and everything like that. Mr. Murphy, you had something to say?
I do. I just have a question regarding what does it mean by must be obligated by June 30th, 2020? That's only 6 days away. What do we have to do to get the money from the state?
So we already have the money from the state, but we have to show that it was spent by June 30th.
And how are we going to do that since we haven't actually approved this at town meeting, the other 283,000?
So one of the benefits of there being a whole bunch of different vendors involved in this is we can actually buy some of the equipment that's on the list prior to June 30th, and in anticipation of it going through at town meeting, so that we'll already have part of the project.
And hypothetically, not that they would, but town meeting says no.
Yep.
Are we on the hook for that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll have the equipment. It's just we won't be able to have the vendor install it. I mean, eventually this equipment needs to be installed. And so if town meeting were to not approve it, then we would continue to keep coming back to them. And I would anticipate that if it weren't funded and the equipment doesn't go up soon, I would anticipate that there would probably be some, the potential for some grievances.
Okay, so sticking with the capital, anything else on this topic or any other capital item?
No, or I just wanted to update, we had a meeting with the schools and they're going to present to us next Tuesday, correct?
Yes, they're on the agenda for next Tuesday. They're revising their requests. They've been, just to give a quick update to everybody, as you know, they've been revising, looking at various opening scenarios. They're busy planning with all the virus stuff, and that's causing them to revisit a lot of stuff, their operating budget and their capital budget and things like that. So they'll be coming to us to give us an update on what they're thinking financially next Tuesday. Okay, anything else on Article 14? I think that was. Okay, anybody have anything else on articles that they want to talk to the Select Board about? I think that the only one that I had, which was a 2-second discussion, is I think I said why we need to have the moratorium removal on this warrant, and I communicated that to Mr. Cronin. So I think that he kind of agrees that there may not be a need for that since it accomplishes nothing as a practical matter. It's just removing language that we don't need anymore. But it's been replaced by language that already takes precedence. So I said to him, in the interest of expediency for this town meeting, it might be something we just want to wait till later to pull out. So I don't want to spend time on that now. Let's see, I think that was it. So I'd give everybody one last call for any questions for the Select Board before we allow them to go enjoy the rest of their evening. Okay, hearing none. Mr. Cronin, you wanted to say something? You're on mute, John. I muted you because your phone was ringing before when you were away. Hold on. Do I have to do it? I guess I have to do it. Let me see. There we go.
We good?
Yep.
Just a couple things. I did speak to council about the moratorium article. That can wait. That is not necessary. We are going to evaluate the possibility of doing something called a consent agenda, which would enable town meeting to bundle articles that are more administrative in nature, less contentious, and vote on them as a bundle and move the dialogue quicker. It's a tactic encouraged by our council. They use it in other communities. I spoke to you about it earlier, Ken. The method would be essentially, as they're doing in Uxbridge, you bundle, the moderator reads a note that the following articles will now be moved to consent, and upon favorable vote, they will all be approved at once. In the event, in the Uxbridge example, 7 people or more stand to object, then the agenda fails and they'll take up each item individually. So it's just a tactic to kind of move ahead efficiently with some articles that traditionally should receive public scrutiny or public interest. This would move things along a little quicker, and we'll evaluate that moving up to town meeting as a way to keep things brief and concise. The only other thing I wanted to bring up was the capital list, and I'm glad, I think Dan brought it in. We are going to speak with the schools this coming Monday night about some emerging capital items that could come back into Article 14. We understand the fluid nature of what they're dealing with, and we want to work with them. So we'll hear from them Monday night, probably update that as well. I've been keeping a running tab, and I wanted to confirm, Ken, for your board, in case I missed anything, my homework. And I don't know if we'll be on your call next week. We're slated to be in executive session tomorrow night, Friday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night to give ourselves some flexibility to address a contract for the new town administrator. But basically, I'm going to ask about the revolving fund and want them to explain the expenditure ceiling matter that we discussed for the sustainability coordinator. Is the petition article in the ordinance binding? I'll find out from general counsel. I'll find out from Mr. Ritter when he returns tomorrow if the retroactive road acceptance is an issue for those 2 articles that deal with that matter. Article 20, I heard Vin talk about whether or not we can move that Middlesex retirement matter off to an OPEB style special act. And then finally, we'll remove the $54,000 from the wastewater treatment plant from the capital list. I think that was my homework. If I missed anything, somebody can probably let me know or shoot me an email.
John, just on the retroactiveness on the roads, could we find out what the reason behind doing it retroactive would be rather than doing it on town meeting day forward?
Yep, benefit. Yep, you got it.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't understand. Like, there's doesn't seem to be any benefit to the town to doing that. But we'll let you go off and find out. Okay. Anything else for the select board while we have them here? Okay. Hearing nothing, I guess you're free to go, John. Anybody can, any of the 3 of you can stick around if you want to. But we'll move on to our next agenda item, which I believe is Chief Cassidy. Yes, Chief Cassidy, you want to give us the COVID-related financial update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I hope your committee knows, last Thursday, we were notified by the treasurer that the $1,317,137 had been received in the town's bank account. After we received that notification on Monday evening, the select board directed the accountant to create 2 emergency fund accounts in accordance with DLS Bulletin 2020-07. The existing or the requests that have already come in that we were hoping that would be CARES Act eligible, that have already been charged to the COVID project, the accountant was in the process of making journal entries to go back and reclass those or make a journal entry to charge them against the CARES Act fund. And the other emergency fund account that was created is what's referred to as a COVID-19 FEMA account, because some eligible expenses, there's a 75-25 cost share. So this would allow her, through a journal entry, to charge 75% of the eligible expense to the FEMA fund in anticipation of reimbursement, and 25% from the CARES Act funds that are already in the bank account. So that's great news that we got the money, and that it will allow us to charge things to the proper accounts. And then, as Mr. Cronin explained earlier, the other thing that we discussed on Monday evening was a process by which subsequent requests would be made. Basically, the way that expenses would fall would be in three categories. Those that had already been incurred and had been communicated to me prior to the CARES Act request, those that were anticipated and had been communicated to me prior to the CARES Act request, and then those that had either not been anticipated or had not been communicated. And that's the process by which, for the time being, if a department head or an individual that has spending authority has a request that they want to charge against the CARES Act, they would bring it to me. I would check to see whether or not it was eligible under the federal guidelines, and then I would bring it to the board during one of my weekly updates, and they would approve or decline whether or not we would commit those funds based on the remaining balance.
Okay, good. I mean, as I said, we discussed that earlier, right? We do need our process. So any updates on expenses, right? Are we seeing any more, you give us the usual updates. Are we expecting more PPE costs, anything?
Right. So part of the CARES Act request did anticipate PPE purchases this summer as part of the school's ramp up to either a full opening or a hybrid opening. And so that was already built into the model that was part of our application. We had a request from Youth and Family Services. She was looking for some specialized PPE to allow her staff members to be able to, their facial expressions to be able to be seen. I know you may have seen the masks that have the clear opening for deaf or hard of hearing individuals. So we're investigating the availability of those. But right now, we're well situated for the second surge that could come in the fall based on what we have in stock for public safety. And so there are no major expenses coming up in the near future. I would like to express my thanks and appreciation to Mr. Keese, the facilities manager. Today, the barrier devices were installed at both the town hall as well as at 1750 Washington Street, which is another one of the milestones that we needed to reach before we can look to do a soft opening of several of the municipal buildings.
Good.
And those costs also were included in the CARES Act request model, and because that is considered to be PPE, that's looking at a 75-25 split between FEMA reimbursement future and CARES Act present.
Okay, Sue, you had a question?
I do have a question. Chief, oftentimes we see medical providers have not only a mask, but the sort of a plastic shield coming from sort of head down. Is that, so just, I was thinking for town employees who don't have, let's say the barriers or shields, are those added protections? Are those, I'm presuming they're added protections. Are they a significant cost? Have we thought about potentially using those? What's the benefit in terms of reduction of exposure? I don't know a lot about them, so which is why I'm asking.
Sure, we do have the full face shields, which sort of look like a translucent welder's visor. They're not as expensive as a welder's visor. They're multiple use. The only challenge with that is they don't offer the same level of droplet protection So those could be used in certain types of environments. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to be used by our first responders as the sole means of protection. They can be used on top of an N95 or a KN95 if there is a droplet producing procedure that's being used, but they would be a potential option for some in an office environment with intermittent contact, either with the public or with coworkers. And as you look at some of the reopening guidelines with regards to occupancy levels, there are certain ways to allow offices to have certain occupancies, and that can either be through a physical barrier or other barriers on the individual. So if you've got two cubicles that are in proximity to each other, there are a couple ways that you can try and provide proper separation, and that's either through the provision of PPE that needs to be worn all the time, or there can be a barrier device that's placed between the two of them. And then you need to look also at your HVAC flow path and whether or not that's going to be moving any potential virus particles.
Okay, thank you.
And your other question was cost. They're not super expensive, and we do have some in stock, and the schools had also been mass producing those towards the beginning of the shutdown because they had the 3D printers and they wanted to feel like they were doing something to be part of the response process. So they did create and print some face shields that have been made available to public safety, in addition to what we have in stock from our vendors.
So the mask plus the shield is better than just the mask.
Yes, and the mask and the shield, in some circumstances, can be sufficient for certain types of workers, but not for first responders who might be interacting with people in close proximity.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay.
Any other questions of the chief concerning the COVID-19 update? Okay, and thank you, Chief. We can move on. We have two more things left on our agenda. One is the FY21 budget. So the question is, do we have anything? I don't know I know not all of you attended Monday's update from our legislators, but some of you were there and heard. I'll just very quickly say that the short and sweet message is nothing has really changed. The state is looking to they're looking to pass continuing resolutions for July and August that will fund local aid at 1/12 of FY20. However, we all know that just gives us 2 months. You know, that it was Karen Spilka said basically revenue shortfall is still looking like it's going to be in the $6 billion range, which is quite a lot of money. So I think that from our perspective, that doesn't change much because that's what we were kind of anticipating. She seemed to be relying, or not relying, but they're still hoping that some federal assistance comes. But as we have discussed at our meetings, the last couple of meetings, there's no clear path to that right now politically. So she mentioned possibly hoping to having some better information from the feds by the end of July, although I hesitate to, I wouldn't, put any stock in that, only because, the can's been pushed down the road, right? We were waiting in April to see if the feds would do something. We're waiting in May, so I think at this point, it's pretty clear that and we've talked about this, right? We're going to move forward with that. But generally, I just want to give you the quick summary was that for all intents and purposes, the matters that she discussed financially that both Carolyn and Karen discussed on Monday, from my perspective, didn't change the financial picture from what we already knew. So it just confirmed that things are looking no different than we expected. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's much we need to do this week. We'll probably need to add some to the streetlight request. Yeah. It's $4 and see if the schools can maybe tighten up a little bit. Their requests over time, but it's nothing that we have anything actionable now.
Yeah, well, I don't think we do either. That's what I was going to say. I think we still have the spreadsheet out there, which I'll get to you, Mr. Whitaker, if I'll send you a copy of it. But that's kind of the budget blueprint. I think we just have to refine that blueprint. And from my perspective, we don't want to go too far into that tonight, simply because we're going to get an update from the schools on Tuesday that obviously is going to, potentially, have a significant impact one way or the other, right? If they bring their request down, or if they, have a request that's a little steeper than we expect. I will reiterate that obviously the liaisons from our committee to the schools, Dan, Michelle, and myself have been meeting regularly with them. So we know they have some budget updates, but we'll wait till Monday because they haven't voted them as a committee yet. So we'll wait until they come to us on Tuesday rather, and give us an update. So, okay. So if there's anything else anybody wanted to comment on the FY21 budget plan at this point. Okay, I don't hear anything. Our last item on the agenda was the warrant, but really it was anything we didn't want to discuss, but we discussed, I think, everything before. So is there anything else not select board related on the warrant that anybody wants to discuss about the warrant this week? Okay, okay. We'll wrap it before the motion is made. I do want to just say one thing, which is we're going to hear from the schools next Tuesday. We have the warrant in hand now, or what I would perceive, obviously we heard about potential changes tonight, but for all intents and purposes, we're pretty close to a final warrant. Starting next Tuesday when we hear from the schools again, it's going to be sharpen our pencils time. I'm going to talk to, Sharon's on the call right now. Sharon and Mary and I are going to have to, I'm going to talk to them later this week about getting started on the report preparation, all the documents, those boilerplate things we need in the back of the report. So we're going to start moving on that pretty quickly so that we can be prepared when the time comes to get our report out. So, okay, anybody have anything else they want to add before we close for this evening? Okay, I don't hear anything, so I'll entertain the motion at this time.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Okay, so Mr. Maxwell got it in first that time. Mr. Alfred, that's not subject to debate. So agree to a roll call vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. So we are now adjourned at 9:23 p.m. That concludes the Wednesday, June 24th meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you just heard, we will be meeting again next Tuesday back on our normal schedule, June 30th at 7 p.m. Again, we'll be virtual, as we will be for the foreseeable future. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.
Good night.